G'day guys, my name's Michael and I am the Dead Aussie Gamer, here to share with you my tips, tricks, ideas and strategies for playing and running tabletop role-playing games. Today we're going to be doing another class spotlight focusing on the fighter. Now, a lot of people have asked me about the class spotlights, and I was originally going to do them in order, like, you know, the barbarian, the bard, the cleric, the druid, etc. But there was so much love for the fighter, so many people were asking for it, that I said, you know what, let's make it, let's do this. The fighter is such a popular class because it is one of the easiest classes to get into, but it affords so much versatility. Today's video is going to be all about exploring that versatility, how we can build our different types of fighters, and of course, a few acting tricks for embodying a good fighter. So first of all, what types of fighters are there? In my opinion, there are three fundamental foundations that focus on any fighter. That's right, my alliteration was on point for that one. Thank you, scriptwriter. The first, of course, is your frontline fighter. Now, the frontline fighter is your melee specialist. If you are playing Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or anything that uses the standard 6-stat system, your strength is where your fighter thrives when they are a frontline fighter. They will be using their strength in order to push through battle, to be able to ensure that when they hit hard, because you do not want to get into a war of attrition on the front line. In an exchange of damage, you want to make sure that you are at the pinnacle so that you can walk away the victor. The second is the ranged combat specialist. Now, the ranged combat specialist is someone who focuses on using distance, measuring, archery, crossbows, even siege weapons to a degree. All of these weapons that keep you at a distance are your skills. More often than not, fighters who play at range also require to stay mobile and be able to have that maneuverability while they're playing. Otherwise, they may find themselves caught in a very tight spot, especially when confronted with other frontline fighters or even just hardier melee-based combats. The third, and probably my favorite if it gets pulled off well, is the tank. The tank fighter is someone who has a lot of armor and a lot of hit points. This focuses on your constitution. Sorry, I forgot to mention, dexterity is based on your ranged stuff, so strength, dex, con, that's how it works. My apologies. Moving on. Yes, so constitution-based fighters are very rare, mostly because people don't like the idea of being the big battle turtle. It can get kind of wearying, especially if you do play a prolonged game, because your job is basically to ensure that the war of attrition leans in your favor. More often than not, constitution-based fighters become a part of the other two, making it so that you can survive while still being able to engage in combat. No fighter is any one of these things. All fighters are all three skilled. If you are a frontline fighter, you get into a battle, you slay an orc, the orc happens to drop a crossbow, there is an archer shooting at you, there is nothing to stop you picking up that crossbow and firing at that orc shooting at you. Yes, you might not be a dexterity-based fighter. Yes, it might not be where all your skills and specializations are, but the way that a fighter always works is their attack prowess, their proficiency with the weapon, means that you can pick up that crossbow and you can fire it back. Similarly, if a person gets too close to you while you are at range, you could very easily be wearing thick and heavy armor that as soon as they get close to you, it's more of a, okay, well, have at you, and you start pummeling them while they're pummeling you, and, well, because you've got your thicker armor, you pummel them a little bit faster than they pummel you. These three aspects all interchange and intertwine in order to make your unique and incredible fighter. So where do we go for builds? How do we build a fighter? Now, a lot of people ask me about the difference between strength-based fighters, dex-based fighters, con-based fighters. Long story short, they're all the same. A strength-based fighter will do more damage than a dex-based fighter. A dex-based fighter will have more armor than a strength-based fighter, but not as much armor as your constitution-based. The constitution-based fighter will do far less damage than the other two, but will outsurvive both of them. Oh, and the ranger obviously has distance to play with, so it takes longer for frontline fighters to approach them. Each have their own strengths, each have their own weaknesses. So how do you decide what you want to do? When you are deciding your first fighter, I always recommend that people decide what they want to play based on what weapon you want to use, right? If you sit there and go, I'm going to use the thing with the biggest damage, well, sure, go ahead. If you're playing Pathfinder, I'll save you some trouble. The Earthbreaker is the number one, followed by the Greatsword, or either way, like both are incredible weapons. If, however, you are like me and like to really challenge yourself and to really explore how well you can play your game at the mid to lower section, you can start being really creative. Use a dagger, but don't say it's a dagger. Say it's a fruit knife, right? So there you are. You are the fighter who is skilled in fruit knife. And I guarantee you, at the end of it, when you realize that your weapon abilities and your skills and all of the stuff that you have added to your character have made this 1d4 weapon equivalent to a 1d4 plus 12, there's a certain point where an extra 4 points from a dice roll makes no difference to the 12. It's kind of that, yeah, okay, well, it's funnier to think that someone could grab a fruit knife and just decimate an army of orcs. Be creative, have a lot of fun, and use your equipment as if that was part of your character, as if that was your highlight, I guess. Armor as well. Don't neglect the armor. Don't go, okay, well, I'm going to wear the biggest, thickest thing. Be like, oh, well, I'm a ranger. Why shouldn't I wear leather? Or if I'm an unarmed fighter, hey, how cool would it be if I focused on not wearing any armor at all? All of these different aspects of it. Well, I mean, yes, you may as well play a monk there. And I heard some of you say it. If you said it, then for shame, because yes, you're right. You should have played a monk. So yeah, that's how you want to play a fighter. You start by choosing the weapons and the tools. The next thing you want to look at is how you want to use those tools to interact with combat. Now, that's a very unusual way to approach it because, because a lot of people think interaction really only happens out of combat, but it doesn't. In combat, interaction goes from any aspect of the fight. It could be you protecting an ally. It could be you protecting your quest item, or you trying to reach and retrieve a special object or person even from the clutches of an enemy. Battles change, and being a fighter means that you have the capacity to interact with the battle on a number of different levels. You need to decide how you want to interact with it. Do you want to be someone who rushes in and deals as much damage to the biggest thing as possible? Or maybe do you want to try and lure people away and be able to stay one step ahead of them, do a lot of damage and pose a threat before moving around so that your other allies can outflank them? Do you want to work on teamwork feats and be able to work in tandem with other members of the group? All of these things are decisions that can also help shape your fighter. If I have to give anyone hints on how to play this, right? And I can only really do this for Pathfinder. D&D has its different specialities, and the specialities are great, and they fall very nicely into their various roles. I'm currently playing a Battlemaster fighter, who is a lot of fun. And by the way, Battlemasters pretty much fall into what I'm about to say now, so that's what you want to look at. If you're playing a fighter, and you're playing in Pathfinder, do have a look at things like your teamwork feats and stuff like that, because little things like having a surplus of feats and abilities is one of those things that you can easily throw things away so that you can explore and try things out. Don't be afraid to try things out with a fighter, because yes, you might make a bad decision, or this might not necessarily work. It doesn't mean you can't retrain your skill. It doesn't mean you can't pick up a new skill to help make your other skill better. It's how you learn, and it's how you explore. And the fighters allow for a lot of exploration for the thing we call battle. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is how people generally portray fighters. How do people come across them? Now, fighters, I feel, get such a low rap. Anyone's a fighter. A bandit could be a fighter. A guardsman's a fighter. Dave at the Video Easy, he's a fighter. All these people being fighters is not really indicative of what I imagine a fighter to be. When I embody a fighter, I try and play someone who has dedicated his time, his effort, and his energies to being skilled at a particular form of warfare or battle. If I am a guardsman, Sure, I'm a level 1 guardsman. That means I woke up at the crack of dawn every day. I went to the training post. I pulled out my sword and shield, both standard utility weapons for our particular part of the kingdom, and I've used it until my hands bleed. And then I had my meals, went to bed, and I woke up the next day and did it again. There are calluses on my fingers. There is a bandage wrapped around my hands. My weapon is worn but always sheen. These things for me, embody being a fighter. So you need to remember to do those sorts of things when you are playing one. Don't simply say, oh yes, I'm a fighter and I do damage. Do you have a connection with your weapon or your armor? Is it your ancestral weapon? Did it come from your father? Was your father a fighter? Is that what inspired you to become one? Are you someone who has simply been thrust into the service of a noble quest? I had a character once upon a time who was a stable hand who ended up being swept up by some heroes. He had no idea what he was doing, but because he lifted hay and baled it over and over and over again for the horses, he eventually learned how to use a pitchfork incredibly well, evolving his style of fighting from the pitchfork to a trident, and he became a gladiator. Well, not through his own choice. He kind of got captured by some gnoll and thrown into a big ring. But that's neither here nor there. But still, that is how you want to evolve a fighter, right? Fighters aren't people who are just violent. Fighters are people who know how to wield violence with a skill and proficiency unseen by any other class. Unseen by any other class. I stand by that for now, anyway. Until someone proves me wrong in the comments below, which I'm sure someone will. Okay, so what does a fighter sound like? How do you voice a fighter? Okay, so for me, a fighter can definitely sound like anyone. But I always find it's easier to make a fighter sound really cool and really, I suppose, experienced or learned in battle if they slow their speech down and they don't stammer and stutter, much like I do. Those who are nervous or anxious, they tend to stutter. They tend to speak really, really quickly. People like bards, for example, or weak-willed, or weak constitution people. Whereas a fighter, for me, is someone who is able to stop, take stock of the world around them. Now, this doesn't mean they have to be miserable. It just means that they can be slower than normal. Let me give you an example. Alright guys, listen, we need to gather all of our equipment and make sure that we prop up this door because the giants, they're going to come in and they're going to rip everything apart and we're all going to die. Repeating that sentence. Alright everyone, what we need to do now is we need to gather as much of the barricade as we can muster and place it in front of this door. The giants will soon be upon us, and it is up to us to make sure that we hold the line here. Now that is a very masculine one, but let's try it with the gnomish accent. Alright everyone, what I need you all to do now is remain calm. Gather as many items, objects, barrels, whatever we can find, and place it in front of that door. As soon as the giants reach us, they're going to burst through there. But we're going to try and make it as difficult as possible for them on the way in. Now, yes, still got that kind of silly, high-pitched voice, but at the same time, just simply slowing down the pacing of it gave it that sense of experience, that veteran fighter feel. And I think that's just, that's what I love from being a fighter, from playing that kind of character. Alright, so thank you so much, guys, for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share the video with your friends. Now, we're going to be continuing doing the character and monster spotlights at this time slot every single week, so be sure to check them out as well. Next week, we're going to be doing a monster spotlight, so that'll be a lot of fun. And, of course, if you've got any suggestions or anything you guys would like to see on the Dead Aussie Gamer channel, head on over to our Discord channel. The description's in the link below. If you want to come and read some of the articles and questions that I've answered on Facebook, the link will be in the description below as well. And, of course, if you want to become one of our cheeky guys Goblins and help support Ask a Pathfinder, then head on over to our Patreon page, and for as little as $1 a month, which is like, you know, a cup of coffee down in Australia, you can really help us try and make this a bigger and better and more fun experience for everyone who visits the channel. Until next time, guys, from the Dead Aussie Gamer, be sure to game hard or die trying. Have a good one.